Ilyanna is a foundation doctor year 1. So she's a junior doctor. She graduated in 2021. So she's just transitioning into the NHS. She's going to be perfect to talk to you a little bit about the university life and socializing and give her a little bit of her perspective, because she's also, so she works now in Dundee, a hospital in Dundee in Scotland, and she's also an IMU transfer student, and she is the head of a mentorship program, which she's going to be speaking to you about in a little bit, that can also help you and provide a little bit more of guidance and support throughout your careers as international medical students. So pretty much, Ilyanna, welcome. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you.
Let me stop screen sharing.
I'll try and share screen now. Hopefully it works. Can you see that?
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, great. Perfect. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ilyanna, and I think Amanda pretty much summed up everything.
Ilyanna, I'm so sorry. I think it's not on full screen. So
right. I'll do that.
Amazing. Perfect.
Right. So hi, my name's Ilyanna. And just as Amanda was saying, I am an IMU transfer. So I'll just explain a little bit about my journey as a medical student. So I'm from Malaysia, and we have a university in Malaysia called IMU. It stands for International Medical University. And so how it works is they have a program where you basically twin with a university overseas after you've done 2.5 years of preclinical medicine in Malaysia. So that's what I did. I spent 2.5 years in Malaysia, and then I transferred to the University of Dundee for 3rd year, and just continued on and graduated from the University of Dundee. So now I'm working in Dundee in Scotland. So I kind of experienced medical student life in kind of both Malaysia and the UK. And this is kind of my perspective on how everything worked out and how I found it and how I coped with transitioning as well. So just to give you a brief overview, I know you all are in medical school, most of you. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about what the medical schools in Scotland are like. So I'm based in Dundee, as you can see in this map. So we do 5 years of medical school, and then there's an option to do intercalation between 3rd and 4th year. So intercalation just basically means you take a year out of medical school to do a biomedical science degree. So that can be anything to do with research or teaching, and you get a separate degree when you do that. And a lot of people in Scotland tend to do that as well. Sorry, I think there's a typo there, but anyway, so yeah, you can do an intercalated degree between 3rd and 4th year, and that's the same with Glasgow and Aberdeen University. It's an option that you can do, whereas for Edinburgh, all students do it, so they actually spend 6 years of medical school instead of 5. Right, so adapting to university life. I think the biggest thing transitioning from kind of doing A-levels to uni, you realize that a lot of things are very self-directed learning. And that's something that will be thrown at you quite a lot, that term, especially in Dundee University. They're very big on self-directed learning, which basically means you kind of dictate how you want to study and how you kind of process information and prepare for exams. Obviously, you'll have things like lectures, small group teaching, anatomy labs, and clinical or communication skills. But, you know, that only makes up a very small portion of your day, of your day-to-day life. And, you know, I think there's a common misconception that medical school is very busy. I mean, obviously it can be, but they do give you a lot of self-study time, which means you, especially in preclinical years, you're probably only spending half the day in school, and then the rest of the day you kind of go home and figure out how you want to study. So there's always a wide range of resources. And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming because it's not like in school where you kind of have certain textbooks to read from, whereas over here, when you start a medical school, you have so many resources, it can be overwhelming. So I think you have to find out what kind of resources work for you and what study styles work for you as well. So my biggest tip would be for resources, especially if you're looking at textbooks. Find out what is recommended by your tutors. So usually in your lecture notes, at the end, they'll put their references. And I think based on those references, it'll be good if you can find out what books they use. And so you can learn from those resources because, those are what your lecturers use. And then I think the second thing is making the most out of medical school. So like I was saying, the medical schools allow a lot of self-study time. So make full use of this, not just to study, but to also do things that you enjoy, because you're going to be doing medicine for the rest of your life. So you don't want to be spending 24/7 studying and just doing medical school work. You have to go out there and socialize, do sports, exercise, do whatever you enjoy, like spend time with your friends, watch movies. And I think once you go in preclinical years, you might not have a lot of clinical placements, but when you do, I think try and make the most out of those clinical placements, and ask questions, try and get involved, because that will make it more interesting for you, and you will get a lot more out of it if you are proactive. And it does help direct your studies a little bit better. So for example, if you are in clinic and you're not sure what a disease, the disease that they're talking about, you can then look it up when you go home. So, it does help you figure out what your weaknesses are when you're studying, because when you go on placements, that's when you figure out, there's so many things to read up on, and going there and figuring out what you need to work on, it really helps. So yeah, try and be as proactive as you can when you're on placements. Right. So okay. So, and then adapting to a new city or town. So, this is quite a difficult one. I think in Scotland, the two biggest cities are Edinburgh and Glasgow. And I think when you go to a bigger city, it can be overwhelming because, it's a bigger place. There's so much to explore, and sometimes it can be inconvenient to go around and figure out where everything else is. So I think in the first instance, if you are coming to a new place, try and explore these places around your home. Find out, kind of what the public transport routes are like. I think when I first came to Dundee, what I did was basically find out where I was staying, and find out the nearest grocery store, the nearest, pharmacy, the gyms, what the main attractions are around where I live. So I think just having an idea of how to get to these places and how long it will take you, it becomes less overwhelming, because now you have an idea of how you can access these places. And, speak to the locals, especially in Scotland. Everyone is so friendly. Like, you could be lining up for the bus and someone will just strike up a conversation. They're just so nice. And speak to the locals, your university mates who are locals, and find out what the main attractions are, and use that time to explore these places. And another thing I think that it's really important is register with your GP, and find out where the nearest GP is and register with them, because if you do get sick or you need mental health support, you always have access to your GP. So I think that those are the important things to figure out in the first instance when you're moving. Okay, so as I said, exploring Scotland, So these are the bigger cities in Scotland, just in order. Glasgow is the largest city in Scotland. Edinburgh is the capital. It's beautiful. It's so historic and so nice. So a really good place to explore. There's Aberdeen, and then there's Dundee. So all these places, all these cities are very close to each other. So they're very easily accessible from one city to another. You can take the train, the bus, and you can drive. But I would say train is probably the most convenient mode of transport between cities. And these are just some of my recommendations. Is Edinburgh Castle. If you've never seen it, it's quite dramatic. The castle, it looks just very majestic. And I think if you do come to Scotland, you'll realize that the views in general in Scotland are very, very dramatic. Just kind of if you're on the train, or even on my bus route to work, I get a view of the river, and it's just so beautiful. We're in October, but Christmas is coming, so there's Edinburgh Christmas Market, which is really nice. There's so much food. Last year, obviously, they didn't have it because of COVID, but something to consider visiting over the Christmas period. There's Loch Lomond, which is in the national park, and that's where you'll find the Loch Ness monster. So go on tours there. There's Inverness, Fort William, St. Andrews. These are just like a list of places that I would recommend going, but obviously there's so much to explore in Scotland. If you just Google places to visit, you'll find all these places and more. All right. So I just moved house, and I thought I would include this because I thought it was quite useful when I was moving house. I really didn't know what to look for. And after talking to some people, I realized there's a lot of things to consider when you're trying to rent a home. So I think that the general rule is try and do as many viewings of properties as possible. These are some websites that are quite useful. There's Zoopla, CityLets, Gumtree, and try and be as picky as you can. And when you go on viewings, try and really inspect the places, and ask the landlords or the property agents questions. The two main things that I would say are very important are look at the EPC rating. So it's just an overview of the property's energy efficiency rating. So if your energy efficiency is quite low, you're going to end up paying a lot for electricity and gas bills. So try and look for a house with an EPC rating of C or above. Another thing is Scotland is just very cold. I mean, UK in general is quite cold, but Scotland in particular over the winter, it can be quite miserable. So I would say gas heating is much more superior to electric heating, just in terms of price wise, it's more economical. Look at double glazed windows, just means they have 2 glass panes. I'm sorry if you already know this, but it was useful to me, so I thought I would share it with you guys. So I'm really sorry if you already know this, and I'm just repeating myself. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was homesickness. I think I did struggle with this a little bit in 3rd year, and especially for myself. I think because I transferred in 3rd year, everyone had their groups of friends already. And obviously I had my friends from IMU as well, but I think it can feel very isolating when you're joining a new group and that group has already been established. But I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. It's very normal to feel homesick for the first few months. And just let yourself be homesick. It's honestly fine. But, it's important that you kind of try and step out of your comfort zone, try and make new friends. Keeping yourself busy always helps distract you from how you're feeling. I think learning to cook food that I was used to eating at home really helped. So these are the websites that I used for Malaysian food. I mean, these are just examples. There's a bunch on Google that you can find. And I think just speaking to your family as often as you can. Yeah. And I mean, if you are experiencing a prolonged change in your mood, your eating habits have changed, you're not sleeping very well, and your energy levels are constantly low despite having a good amount of sleep and rest, please seek professional help, because you don't want to go in a downward spiral and be alone doing that, experiencing that. Right. So I'm going to be talking about study styles next. I think with medical school, I think this is the hardest bit to figure out, is to figure out what your study styles are and what's the best way for you to basically retain information. So there is two types of studying. So there's passive studying and there's active studying. I only found out about this like 2 years ago. So passive studying is you're just trying to get information from other people. So if you're reading books, listening to lectures, or watching videos, these are all forms of passive studying, and they're good for when you're first trying to learn a subject, to familiarize yourself with a topic, but it is not a good way to retain the information. So to retain information better, active studying is a good way to study and to help you remember. So using active recall. So for example, doing question banks, trying to teach your peers, or what I used to do is I bought like a whiteboard off of Amazon. And if there was anything that I was unsure about or was quite complicated, I would write it down on my whiteboard, rub it off, and write it again, rub it off, and just doing that again and again, and just having that on my wall to read. Was really helpful. If you don't have a whiteboard, use scrap pieces of paper, whatever, a notebook. Yeah, so trying to do that. Other things to be aware of when you're listening to lectures, I think try and be as up to date with your lecture notes as possible. And sometimes lecture notes, the notes there are quite scarce. So if you use your additional resources to populate those lecture notes, that would be quite good. Making your own notes and flashcards are also useful for some people. I know some people it doesn't work at all. I personally used flashcards for when I studied. And I think my mistake in the beginning was when I used to write notes, I used to include every single thing. And that was not useful for looking back on, because there's no target, like you don't narrow down information that's hard to remember or important points. So if you're writing down notes, don't write everything, only write, important points or points that you're finding very difficult to remember, and try to figure out how to make the notes more attractive to your eyes. So trying to use mind maps, tables, making it look a bit more organized than just, paragraphs of notes. And I've highlighted question banks because I felt like this is the most effective way of studying. So I don't know if you all are aware of all the question banks that are available. I mean, obviously you have to pay for them, but I would say they are worth it. There's PassMed, PassTest, and BMJ on examination. These are the three big ones. And if you can, try and do at least one of them more than once, and you can pick out the topics that you want to do questions on, and really, really try and do these, because these are the best ways to study and prepare for exams. Additional resources that you can find, as I said in the beginning, textbooks. The simpler and the more concise the books are, the better. Don't go looking for like very thick, large textbooks, because the information in there is going to be too much for a medical student. So the thinner, the simpler, the more basic, the better. I would highly recommend the Oxford handbooks. There's also the USML ebook, which I mean, we're not studying for the USMLE, but I find their notes very concise, and they've got really good pictures and ways of remembering things, lots of acronyms and stuff. Watch YouTube videos. I recommend these YouTube videos. There's Ninja Nerd, Zero to Finals, and Armando Hasudungan. They just explain stuff so well. And I know this is passive learning, but it helps you understand basic concepts, and helps you understand topics that are quite difficult to grasp. When you're studying, remember to stick to guidelines. The NHS love their guidelines. So, BNF for all the drugs. There's SIGN guidelines, which is specific to Scotland. And then there's NICE guidelines, which is the national guideline for the UK. And find out what your local antibiotic guidelines and formularies are. For Dundee, we use Antibiotic Man. And other online resources I've just listed out here. There are the Teach Me series, Zero to Finals. These are really good online resources that will help you understand your topics a little bit better. And another thing that I wanted to touch on was OSCEs. OSCEs, just, I'm sure you're familiar, your clinical exams, your practical exams. I would say really get in the practice, get used to the time that is allocated to you. I mean, I think in the beginning, sometimes you would feel like you just want to practice everything, and that's fine, and not be limited to time, but try and get used to the time that's allocated to you very early on as well. So you get used to how much time you actually have to do all these things. Universities tend to recycle their OSCE stations, so try to get your hands on past years from your seniors, or not exactly not the exact stations, but try and ask them what kind of things are relevant to the OSCEs. And yeah, I think try and simulate the OSCE scenarios and tasks. So, with your friends, try and have stations and actually go around doing them with the time allocated, so you get used to the format. The resources available are for OSCE is OSCE Stop, which is really good, and Geeky Medics. They're really good resources to practice for OSCE. Oh, sorry, I've gone way past. And the last thing is socializing. I found this really difficult because I'm quite an introvert, and I don't drink, which is also another factor that doesn't help things. But I think the main thing is go to your freshers fairs. I don't know with COVID if they're doing them face to face, but sign up to societies, clubs, and sports that you're interested in. I think in the UK, it's not just Scotland, but everywhere you get Wednesdays, half days, so you can do sports or whatever societies on Wednesday afternoons. These are also good ways to get to know people from other courses. And if you're going out to parties and going on nights out, that's also a good way to meet people. And obviously drink responsibly and try and be safe, stay in groups, make sure you let people know where you're going. In Scotland in particular, we have Céilís, which are basically parties where you go and dance in groups, and men wear kilts, and they dance to Scottish folk music, which is really, really fun. But I'm not the best dancer, but it's just to have fun, and they show you how to dance in the very beginning. So yeah. And last but not least, I think I've rambled on for long enough. Hatch, I would like just to talk about Hatch, which is what I'm a part of. I kind of look after all the mentors in Hatch.M. We're basically an organization that help students develop important skills for learning, trying to get into medical school, and making sure that their CVs are are good to apply to medical school. So I'm a mentor myself, and we usually work in pairs and match them to a mentee who's usually a pre-university student. So if you are interested in becoming a mentor, you can visit our website at hatch.m.com to sign up. Unfortunately, right now, because we're really small, we're focusing mostly on Malaysian students. But as we grow, we hope to kind of expand that to other countries as well. But yeah, and you can also visit our Instagram. Sorry, I don't have it on here, but it's Hatch.M, like Hatch DOTM. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Ilyanna. I think it was very, very useful. Provided them with, I think, a lot of practical tips, so I think that was great, especially about the housing. I think that was super important because it's not often talked about, and most students struggle with housing. So thank you so much for such amazing advice.
No, thank you for letting me talk about that. I'm sorry if I rambled on too long.
No, absolutely. It was absolutely incredible. Don't worry. And if you guys have any questions to Dr. Ilyanna, please drop them in the chat. We're going to be having a Q&A at the end.